So then I'd like to say welcome to everyone to this BBC webinar about how to design and deliver a virtual cultural session. It has been something that is more important these days with COVID-19, but it's also something that is going to be very important going forward. I'd like to start with thanking everyone who are coming to this webinar, who are participating now, but also you who are listening afterwards. Of course, you're welcome, and I'm happy to have you here. I would like to start as well with another thank you to all the positive responses that we have got when we put up this question on our LinkedIn CTT community. And the willingness to share your thoughts and learnings was overwhelming. We had quite a lot of people. And we also had a Google Doc where we asked for input in writing. And I'd like to thank Ruth Steinholtz in UK and Hedvig Mossvall in Sweden and Ines Medores in Brazil, specifically for your feedback there. That's also something we will continue to share with the rest of you as well. We have, as you can see, a very, very good panel with people, and we are happy and proud to present this experienced group of CTT consultants. And they will soon introduce the subject by sharing their thoughts and learnings. So we have Andrea Buchler from Germany, working and leading a company called Change Management in Germany, and you are also working very much globally. Then we have Malena Philpotts. I believe your company name is called MPH Partners, which is around leadership and culture. And you are in Argentina, and you also have a very long experience of working with this globally as well. And then we have, not the least, David Evans from UK, Prime East. And you also work globally. So the thread here is that you have long experience of working in the virtual field, but also a long experience of working in the practical field of using CTT tools. So I'll come back to you very soon, but very glad to have you here and looking forward to hear what you have to say about this subject. And from Barry Center, we have Hannah Lee, who is responsible for marketing and communication. And then we have Phil, Claudia, and me, who are working as support and well, relationship with our network and clients and doing things like this. I'll come back to their role later on here. Just to put the intention of the setup of this 1-hour webinar, we will focus on how we use and have been working with CVA or CDRs or SGAs. I mean, different type of group assessment results in the virtual space. And we will have a panel discussion to start with the first half of the meeting, answering 6 different type of questions that we have asked the panelists to look into and be prepared to answer. And when they speak, you are then invited to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the pop-up, what do you call that, bar at the bottom of the screen or your screen, and write in your questions as they speak. And then Hannah and Phil will come back afterwards and read out those questions, and we will have a Q&A session for about half the meeting as well. The whole meeting will be recorded, or are being recorded, and it will be available for all of you afterwards, along with any additional materials and things that comes up during the meeting. Is there anything that I have missed, Hannah and Phil?
I think you're good. Thank you very much, Tor. It's a great start.
Okay. Well, with that, then I think that we are all ready to start. I'm going to go in just a second here and share my screen with a picture. Let's see if I can get to that. With the questions. This is the virtual culture session. How do we actually work with that? How do we design and do that? And the first question that we are going to work with and going to ask the panel is, what are the advantages of a virtual debrief session? And Malena, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, so I could identify 3 advantages I especially love about virtual sessions. But first, I would like to tell you something. I was so fearful before going virtual the first time. And I just want to say that experiment, just go for it. And I think that what made me learn was just the amount of hours practicing and trying to take out specific learnings and trying something new the next time. So just a little bit of inspiration there in case you are like being pushed to virtual and not feeling very comfortable. Flow with it. There are certain things you can take care of. Now, I want to tell you about the benefits I see. There's an efficiency around virtual culture sessions that is different in my point of view. Firstly, because you cannot bring a 4-hour in-person session directly into virtual. I mean, you need to translate, because virtually we can only focus and be there 60 minutes, 90 maximum. So that also allows you, first benefit, efficiency, to give them some toolkits. Some of our clients don't understand the Barrett language that is so familiar to us. So maybe you can even, give them handouts, a video about the 7 levels, things that they can prepare beforehand, and then you can use the session to go for it. Another point I find super helpful is the polls or interactive tools like Mentimeter. For instance, when I give a culture feedback debrief, I ask people to rank which are like the issues they want to focus, what they think is, and you've got that, if you do the dope voting in person, it might take even longer. The other thing is when you do breakout rooms so they can have deeper conversations, they are time boxed. Woo, here in Latin America, we don't do like time management very well. At least I'm going to talk about myself. So that was great, because then they all come back and there's no going. And yeah, I think in short, those are like I also use another thing about virtual sessions. The fact that you're managing 2 levels, technical and human, empathetic, spiritual, if you like, has given me the excuse to be checking on the participants and having feedback on how they felt. And that enabled like more trust building. And I was like taking that into account for the next session, because generally I don't give a culture feedback in one go. You do it in 2 or 3 because it's shorter, and that gives you time to get feedback on how they're feeling and make some adjustments.
Thank you, Malena. That was rich. David, do you have something to add to this?
Yes, I do.
I mean, we've got a lot of good things here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always great to get someone else's perspective on it, because we all do these things slightly differently. One of the things I found works particularly well in the virtual environment is that it forces us as facilitators to work even more closely with the in-house facilitators that are going to help us on the virtual program. We need to be able to provide great knowledge transfer to those facilitators. We need to get even greater buy-in from within, and the ownership and adoption of the things we're going to be doing in advance, so that those internal facilitators can support the learning process that we're going through on the call itself. I think the other thing it does is it, in a strange sort of way, it makes us become less associated with the outcomes, because the people on the call themselves in that virtual space are working on it, and it becomes, I think, theirs more quickly perhaps than if we're with them in the room, and therefore potentially carrying some of that ownership with us. And I think slightly related to that, there's something about reducing the risk of groupthink as well, because they're not together, they're on their own in front of a screen, not usually, and therefore they potentially have a more opportunity to really think it through for themselves. So I think there's some real value in the virtual debrief sessions. I mean, I personally prefer to be face to face. I prefer to be facilitating in the room with people, but there are some distinct advantages to being virtual, and I've certainly got used to delivering this sort of work remotely, and it does work. And Melina said earlier, it's about really letting yourself go into it and not fearing it in any way at all.
Thank you, Debbie. A lot of things that I will probably want to build upon there, but and explore further. But I think that we'll get to that further down. I'd like to go on to the next question, and that is, how do you prepare for a virtual feedback session differently than you would for a face-to-face session? And Andrea, what would you say is your answer to that?
My answer to that, 3 points. One is I prepare differently from the setup. I have, in these days, I have a special desk with good light and good camera and all the things that to be present for the participants in the session. And the other thing is the design of the session is totally different to session at their place. As Melina said, you have to break it in small parts. I also produce things in advance. For example, the 7 levels, I do videos for the client and they can have a look at the 7 levels before and maybe about the main slides about the model. And what I really had a good experience with a reflection session 2 weeks in advance to get deeper into it for the CVA feedback. That was also a good thing. And also I have a thing, I have my printed material with me because I have printed material around me that I'm able to look at the stuff, what I need, or to mention things out of the session.
So you don't only have the interface that you can actually work with many. Oh, I see.
And if you have the interface, you cannot look up things. And I have the printed material. And I have something funny. I have like I do if I was a client, I have this time boxing thing.
Yeah.
And to have it in mind, that is a time it's left.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Malena, would you like to add anything to this?
I think, and also reading questions, I think in the technical level, I usually use Zoom, and I discovered the polls, for instance. I don't know if people would like to dedicate some more time to discuss one issue, I just set a poll, but I like to have them prepared beforehand. So maybe that's something I would prepare before the session. Another thing is to be efficient in the use of the time you're in the webinar with clear desired outcomes, like defined core values. So maybe I do run a Mentimeter before the session so I can show them what their votes, what the ranking is like, or for a manifesto if you're gonna do the associated behaviors too.
Malena, sorry to interrupt you, but the Mentimeter, that you set up the question beforehand, so to speak, in this tool that gives you a possibility to do voting, right?
Exactly. So you can use it live. Like this Mentimeter also has a word cloud. To do a quick checkout, okay, what's your key learning today? And they can write it, and you can share your screen of Zoom and show how the word cloud goes forming. It's beautiful, it's quick. You even have a deliverable after that, and they feel they're part of it. But I also use Mentimeter beforehand and tell everyone, okay, usually what I do is this. I send an email with the links, with the codes of the Mentimeters we're going to use. Like, let them have everything in advance, because there are people that might not even look at it, but there are others that will feel more secure around virtuality if they can anticipate and have the things they'll be asked to complete.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to like manage both profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And Joan, Campo has also shared the link to Mentimeter in the chat box for you as well. So thank you for that. Let's move on. Thank you, Malena. David, what are the few key things to consider when delivering cultural results online? What are the key things that you think is important to consider?
Yeah, okay. I've got three ideas really. I think one is we need to slightly resist the temptation to be too prescriptive. Now, I know that, as Malena said at the beginning, we're under some time constraints when we're online. Research tells us that attending online workshops can be quite energy depleting for people. Mm-hmm. So we do need to keep the time fairly tight. And at the same time, we need to allow people to be open and explorative about the key culture words that we may be discussing around the current and desired culture values. Mm-hmm. So there is a real balance between the tendency to be very prescriptive and the desire to be as open and as creative as we can be. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an important consideration. One thing that is useful to do is to use the feedback data that we have and that we're debriefing to understand what best style of facilitation might be, because mm-hmm. we do get insights from the value surveys about what might well be going on. So we can tailor our style and approach using the data that we've collected from the client and are now about to debrief. And I think the other thing that's really important is to allow time for checking in with participants, and actually don't underestimate the time this might need. If we just sort of plow on without due consideration of where people are, we may find that we lose people and people drift away from the conversations that are taking place.
Maybe
so
maybe check-in is even more important.
Yeah,
or specifically
absolutely.
important in this environment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's 2 or 3 little tips that I find helpful.
Thank you, David. Andrea, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, I think presence might be different, and that is important for the key players as well. You need a good preparation with a key player. Maybe they are good in presenting in the town hall, but it's a new challenge for them to do it online. Mm-hmm. And as Malena mentioned in the document, the cameras on is an important thing. And if this is not there, it's difficult to be human. And you have to focus on process and time and the whole IT. And that is really important that the people are on track with the whole process. Otherwise, they get distracted. But to be emotion and to allow emotions in that setting is a challenge. And there's also a difference if you know the community or the people because you worked with them before in presence, and then it's easier to move online. If they are totally new, it's more challenging.
Is there, and I ask every one of you now, that is there a time limit for how long sessions you can have that you experience it? I mean, it must be, this is an optimum time. Malena?
I have tried different amounts of times, and to me 90 minutes is a bit of a maximum to have deep dialogue, because as Andrea just said, if we are asking for full presence, you also have to connect with how long someone can be completely concentrated and present and not reading WhatsApps and
exactly.
And so if it's longer, I do experience that I start perceiving they're not all fully on, but it's more difficult to find why. So I rather do like short, high impact, and maybe take it more as a process, a journey. Culture is a journey.
Marlena, if I continue then with the next question, can you share an example of what might go wrong in a virtual session, and how do you work to recover, so to speak?
Well, to start off with,
Maybe nothing has gone wrong.
No, that's not the case. I think I've got tons of tips because many things went wrong. It's not our natural way to connect deeply with someone you love. Usually, how do we connect? Well, we live together. You're in person. So what I want to say is there isn't like more things could happen to inhibit your capability to make people connect in a very deep way. So what I do is, first, I put that like on the table as one of the ground rules. Our connection in a human dimension is it's a responsibility of all of us, not only me. Because something that went wrong once was that as I wasn't having them in the COVID context. It wasn't compulsory to be. It was a regional team, so some were in some offices. So what I realized is that when we connect, like some people are in person and some are virtual, and this I share for after this context. If you like virtual sessions, try to get everyone online in their own computer, having the same conditions, because there was laughter, jokes that were going on among who were in person, and not being able to read and happen.
And
also, like to recover of that, if you're feeling something is not really like you're not building traction, just stop and check, like, hey, I want to add value to all of us. I know these are like very delicate and sensitive stuff we're talking about, but please, I need you. I can't be in your head. I can't be in your heart. Another thing that can go wrong, Tor, is that I believe we sometimes have like a buffer of resistance to our feedback of culture. Usually it's stuff we can connect, but we haven't been wanting to see. So managing that, sometimes I realize that someone might start talking of what the impact it has on them, or the resistance and the excuses. And virtually what I try to do is, okay, before the person goes on a lot and the rest disconnect, what I do is, okay, to take care of all the group, why don't we go into smaller groups, and then each smaller group shares, like try to read what they're needing. If they're needing to go deeper, take them into smaller groups so they can go deeper without leaving the rest of the people.
So you change your strategy as you work with them when you feel that somebody's speaking and taking a lot of space. That's what you're saying?
Yes. I do prepare specially in a culture feedback with maybe a high-level teams where the responsibility is bigger for those results. I do experience like maybe these resistances, while in a validation process focus group, there isn't that much, at risk. So I haven't experienced those kind of things.
Thank you. David, would you like to add anything to this?
I mean, Malena's covered a lot of the points that really are important there, and expressed them really, really well. I think there's something just I'd like to add to that, or build on it, which is to say, even more so than when we're face to face with people, it's really important to keep their attention by asking lots of questions, building into your planning the use of the Zoom poll feature to canvass opinion, to make use of the breakout rooms, to make use of the internal facilitators as well. Sometimes I work with people online with them and use them as a bounce off mechanism, because that way the workshop gets broken up. There's different voices in play on online, and we can almost have a conversation like the one we're having now, which will just keep people's attention rather than firing up PowerPoints or just talking at them through the camera. So it's really keeping the energy levels and being able to feel when the energy levels might be sagging a bit, and be able to bring something onto the table to get the energy levels back up again.
So kind of a backup, have that ready.
Absolutely, and it's as useful for us as facilitators as it is for the people taking part.
And one thing that you said that you're using Zoom and breakout rooms, that there are possibility for that, which leads into the next question, which I would ask Andrea to reply to. How do you use specific technology to support a positive experience? Because I know that in Germany, Zoom is maybe not always that accepted, for example, and that could be the case.
Not.
Most of the time not. So what is your take on technology?
There are a lot of good things, like with Zoom, with the breakout groups, is a good thing. You can work with that easily. And there are a lot of collaboration tools as well, a Mural or Google Jamboard. If you have the client for that and they are able to work with that, wonderful. I think it's more challenging to work with people who are not digital natives. And maybe the first step in this world is Microsoft Teams, and they use it like we used Skype 10 years ago. And this works as well. You have to set up breakout groups extra with MS Teams is another session, but this will work as well. You can use Mentimeter, that will work, and maybe that is a good experience to be part of a bigger thing. I use Padlet as well. Padlet, that you have all like a board and all people write in that board. But it's more, at the same time. But it's more challenging to work with a normal stuff, and your mindset should be, I'm fine with the technical things.
Yeah.
Be afraid. Everything will be perfect, like you always say. And what I learned the last few days in a large-scale event is to do a final rehearsal with a client. It doesn't make sense that you do a final thing. It should work with a client as well, and with their computers, also with a security thing. And do the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Malena, would you like to add anything to all this wisdom?
There's not much to add. That was wonderful, Andrea. Maybe just my experience that has been opposite. When I said everything was going to be perfect and it wasn't, I was live like, okay, cut. Just get it out like in the TV. I didn't know what to do. So I changed. And what I do is I say, everything's not going to be perfect. And it's fine. And we're going to go through. And where I'm just going to say, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Can someone help me? Or, go through WhatsApp and have someone back up that can help you really find how to.
Not being so attached to do everything correctly and have everything working 100%. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Like we're all learning and give space to the possibility that not everything will be going on as you calculated. Also, I think that when they co-create live with technological, Mural, for instance, the energy and the connection is amazing. And maybe that live, I use Mural in-person facilitations, but I mean, it is also like a different flow that can be even more powerful. So, and the last thing I would say is, Andrea mentioned this, how confident do you feel around technology? Some do, others don't. What I did do differently, and I think made the difference, was I was feeling insecure, and that would trigger the insecurity in those who doubt if virtuality is really as efficient as in person. So what I would say is, as Andrea said, rehearse, try it with whoever, your team, and if not, even get coaching around that insecurity, but don't start with that, because that can trigger others to also fade away. So I would say, yeah, just go for it. And also technology, even using, as Andra said, Skype, maybe the conversation is the best thing their best takeaway. So if you're not comfortable around many technological, I don't know, the Mentimeter, maybe it doesn't work for you and you don't need it.
No.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Malena. Let's move on to the last question before we start up the Q&A. And David, how do you feel? How do you follow up with the client after a virtual session?
Yeah. Well, for me, the follow-up is very similar to any culture feedback workshop that I might conduct, whether it be online or in person. I think firstly and most importantly, what I'd be doing is setting some action tasks for participants to take back into the workplace. That might be checking in on some of the value meanings that perhaps weren't bottomed during the workshop. It might be about thinking around some of the culture change actions that we may have discussed in the workshop, or at least touched upon. It might be canvassing opinion amongst their colleagues and sharing with their colleagues what they've been doing in the virtual workshop. So, you know, and that would be something I'd probably do almost regardless of the medium in which we're working. I'd also be looking to do some form of feedback survey, using perhaps Microsoft Forms or SurveyMonkey or something similar to that, really just to get feedback, the useful feedback we always get when we ask people how it went and what was particularly useful and what we could have done better. And also obviously providing feedback, providing our own feedback to our client about how we felt it went, and providing them with some of the outputs from the workshop, so that they
and that's
can
more to the leaders or the one who are your contacts.
So they can disseminate that to the participants and to other interested parties. So I think it's very much thinking along the lines that we might think along in any environment in which we're providing a feedback session.
Thank you, David. Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the only thing to do reflection session with your client after this process and talk through the next steps. And it's the same like the debriefing of the CVA, like the follow-up. You have to do more preparation for online. For short sessions, it needs more preparation.
And maybe in these type of situations that the world is in right now, that follow-up, the virtual follow-up is going to be very much more present, I guess. Thank you very much. I think with that we're actually going to move forward, and I'm inviting Phil and Hannah. Sorry, into the room as well. And I don't know, you have seen questions, but if you haven't written in any questions, please know that you can do that. Any questions as they speak for the rest of the meeting in the QA box, and you find that at the bottom of your screen at the pop-up banner there, if you haven't found that yet. I see that some questions are coming into the chat box. Please move them over into the Q&A box, because we are covering all these, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can in the time that we have space for right now, before the end of the hour. And whatever question that is not answered, we will ask the panelists to come back with their answer, and we will feed that back in writing to you afterwards. So don't hold your questions. Every question is important, and just feed it into the question box. With that, I leave it over to Phil and Hannah.
Thank you. I think we'll just flip-flop between us, Hannah, and we'll start at the top and work through, because there's a lot of great questions coming through. So the first one is from Chanda, and it's we've talked already about what do you do after the kind of the feedback session, but then Chanda's curious to learn about the approach post the feedback. I mean, can you then go into actually doing more of the workshop delivery, the transformation work in this medium as well, in a virtual environment as well? And anybody, like, free format on picking these questions up now, so whoever wants to answer.
I didn't get the question. What is the question?
Well, the question is, we've talked about providing feedback of the values assessment results in a virtual environment, have any of you then gone on to do the actual, post the transformation, go into the transformation work? Post the values assessment, actually doing transformation work in a virtual environment as well?
For me, the answer to that is it really depends. And that sounds a bit of a cop-out, but it's really, first of all, how much appetite has the client got for working virtually? And obviously at the moment, everyone has an appetite for working virtually. So some of what we might be doing in a constrained environment like we are today is necessarily going to be done virtually. So I think it really depends on the nature of the work that's going to be carried out, and I think it depends on the client's appetite for working in a virtual environment. But in the end, my view would be that we'd be working probably in a mix of both face-to-face and virtual. Would be my answer to that.
Good, yeah. I mean, my quick reflection is that many organizations are virtual. Barrett Value Center is a virtual organization now, and the work that we do, we only meet physically as a company once a year. So I would say 95% of the work that we do, talking to each other and on our ongoing development, is in a virtual environment. So it's definitely possible.
Yep.
Yeah. And also maybe I was thinking the questions you can make are also what would be, I don't know, for example, what actions do you see we need to do as a team, as an organization? And you can either set up a Google Doc where everybody sees what everybody's suggesting, or I've also done like the Survey Monkey, or, and everybody does their individual, and then in the next session you show what, but I think I'm with David that the questions you would ask have to do with what happened, with who they are, with what you see you need to be like triggering.
Yeah, good. I mean, for smaller groups, Google Docs are amazing ways of having groups of people working together and co-creating. So that's another it's another tool in the toolkit.
Yeah. And the same you can do on Teams.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
All right, next question is from Fiona. In the beginning, when we were talking about the difference between online and in face-to-face sessions, I think all of you mentioned the importance of really checking in and creating that space to kind of warm up the experience. And David, you mentioned specifically some questions that you use, and Fiona was wondering what those questions are, and if anybody else has kind of check-in things that they use for their clients.
Well, I think I'd be asking again. It's facilitation, and I would be asking questions around how are you feeling? Are you all with this? Is there any sense that we're losing people? Do we need to double back and just cover off some stuff we just did a few minutes ago? It's really about making sure people are present and that they're with the flow of what we're trying to achieve. Of course, some of that comes in the setup to the whole workshop. But it's really just, I think, being even more keenly aware to ensure that we have people present for the period of time that we're on the workshop. And so it will be those open questions around, how are you? Are you still with us? How are you feeling? Do we need to double back and do any revision on some of the earlier work?
And I would add, if you use Zoom, you can directly go into breakout groups to have a talk between three. And this lifts up the energy always. And if they come back, what is your freshest thought this morning or this evening?
Yeah.
Great.
We're getting suggestions on check-in questions from Ed here. So, and anybody can read those in the chat box. So if anybody's on the call has got suggestions to answer the questions that are coming up, then please put them in here. Everybody can read them, and then we'll share them with everybody who's watching afterwards as well.
Great.
Good. So I'm going to go to Ruth's question. I leave time after I ask people. after I asked a question, I leave time because it takes people time to unmute. So there are often short silences. Does anyone have any tips or good ways to handle this? The kind of these technological silences and gaps that happen in sessions.
You have that space now.
Perfect.
Just practicing.
A silence.
You're so right. You're so right, Tor.
We're doing the role play of the silence.
I'd simply say that we know that does happen, and it happens if there are a lot of people in the room, then that's going to happen even more so. So we need to build that in to our timing plan for the workshop. But no, I mean, we just encourage people to be ready to talk when we'd like them to, so that we can try and minimize that.
Yeah, good.
Something I experienced is when the team isn't as close. Sometimes when I ask a question, no one answers, and I think there's something about in person that you sort of look at someone, no, and you can't do that. And something I discovered, in case it helps, Ruth, is for instance, in Zoom, you can have people raise their hands, and in some groups, they feel more comfortable raising the hand than just unmuting and expressing themselves. So I think it's being flexible and empathetic to read what's happening to participants and how you can help them out.
Yeah, it's a tradition we've had in the company. Like, if you want to talk, just raise your hand, and everybody can see that. And it's just a gentle way to keep the conversation flowing.
Yes, and you can even have it like, if you have your participant list, people who raise a hand in Zoom, they have like a button so you can see a little hand beyond seeing the pictures, because as someone said in the questions, it's true that sometimes you can only see 3 people on camera. So it's also, getting to find alternatives.
Yeah.
I have a question from Marina. As virtual sessions do not enable full emotional or natural emotional expression, what can be done to facilitate this more effectively?
Okay, I read that, and actually I was dying to answer, because I think one of the most emotional and deep courses I had was CTT 2, and it was virtual. And all we needed was our values and sharing them with another person who has a completely different culture, a completely different background. She just met you, or he, and is giving you feedback. And what I want to share with you is that magic, that connection goes beyond distance, presence. It's so don't limit that connection emotionally to in person. The way I find works for me is, again, breakout rooms. It looks like the mantra. No, it seems like a mantra, but when I find that easier when it's smaller groups and more interaction than the whole group together and people muted. I agree that there's a little bit more block of flow in emotional level. Yeah. So breakout rooms.
Good.
Small group discussions.
And if you have the opportunity to have the tile screen with all the people on it, that facial connection it is very, very powerful too. I know not all platforms do that, but Zoom is particularly good for that.
Yeah. I was in a Zoom call 2 weeks ago where there were over 50 faces on one screen. So it is possible to get a significant number of people on video at the same time.
Well, is there a maximum number of people that you would invite to a virtual feedback session? Does anybody have any
It
feelings
depends on
about
the objective, what you what you want to do. If you only want to present, and if you have to design, like you design a workshop with breakout groups and things like that. But I noticed a great difference as between if you have video or not. Otherwise, you feel as a facilitator like there's a block between. You have no idea, only a little bit of the voices, and it's challenging.
Yeah, it becomes almost more of an information sharing exercise, which is really not what we're trying to achieve in a cultural feedback session. So, I mean, I try and limit the numbers if there's a lot of interaction to do, and where there's, as we said earlier, we feel that there's a time limit on a workshop that's virtual, and therefore, how much can you achieve in that time when you've got lots and lots of input compared with, say, maybe a dozen people. So I think it also slightly depends on the contract and the relationship you've got with the client. So the more familiar you are with the client, then perhaps you've already got some energy flowing between you as a client and partner. If the relationship is newer perhaps, or less strong, then I think you've got to be really careful about how many people you have on, in my opinion.
So Carlo is asking about timing again. I know Marlene, you were suggesting 90 minutes was a kind of maximum, but he's asking, could you do longer sessions if you did a 90-minute, took a break, came back? Could you do, he's suggesting a 6-hour session. So do you do them like 90 minutes in one day, that's enough, or could you do longer sessions than that?
This is personal, and it's just one point of view. It's not the truth, but to be honest, I see that if we want deep conversations, it's a bit too intense to be like more than 3 hours in a day around this. So I would definitely not go for 6, and understand that it's digital. Digital doesn't need like this same day. It's being able to open up and think of your workshop, maybe, unless you have a time constraint. And I guess it depends on the risk management, what's needed, and where are the ups and the downs. I would go for 60, very interactive, high energy, maybe 90 or 2 hours max. But I think that this if not energetically, it goes. It's easier to just be, like think, oh my God, when is this finishing? That happens to me, Carol. I go to WhatsApp and I start like, okay, who's going on in LinkedIn? So
it's down to the desired outcomes, isn't it? What is it you're trying to achieve in the process of the workshop? And I absolutely agree that bite-sized chunks make it more of a journey as well. It gives people a chance to perhaps think from one chunk to the next as well. So if in doubt, keep it slightly shorter than it feels you should.
I also gained good experience to put it into chunks, what I did normally on a whole day and over 2 weeks in different parts. And that was really gorgeous.
And just to kind of build on this topic, I know that it depends on the intention or the purpose of the session, but is there a sort of a general or example format that you might use in a 90-minute session that you would work with your clients?
Like a general structure. Check in, check out, it's the same. And
in between, magic happens, right?
Yes. And always
it's that easy.
Can work with breakout groups. This lifts the energy. And normally, if you have a speech of the board of 45 minutes, you have to shorten it to 15. Otherwise, people will be distracted by their mobile, and things are going on in the home office with other people, homeschooling.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that.
Ed's asking, how do you handle resistance from your clients around going online?
Well, at the moment, we're not getting any.
On the contrary. Yeah.
I think there's two things. I think, first of all, we go online to achieve certain desired outcomes. And if we feel that going online is the best medium, then we need to try and help them to understand that this is the best medium for the desired outcomes that we're seeking. I mean, the client may be completely resistant, in which case, at the moment they'd have to wait, but then we'd look to go face to face. But if we say, look, the most effective use of your time and funds and everyone else's time in this process would be for us to have a 75-minute online workshop where we can drill down to certain key understandings about the culture. It may be a handful of values words, for example, that we really need to get some sort of clarity on. Then we demonstrate in some way how that's possible to do. And it's usually going to be part of a mixed economy of inputs and outputs.
Thank you.
I wanted to share that I've got, even in this context, one of my clients is wanting to wait, and they're actually scheduling and then rescheduling as lockdown gets it. And I'm like, I think in that sense, you're trying to generate buy-in in an idea that is yours. And I think that if you concentrate on why it's great for you, I don't think that's going to be the path, I would do like an empathy map on what that person really fears, what are their pain points around them, and maybe, or even have a conversation about it, and maybe even, sharing like 3 scenarios, like these are the pro cons, these are the, if we do this part online, this part in person, if we do all in person, and help them decide with data maybe that they might not have. If it's someone that doesn't like it, they might be only listening to their reasons why they don't want to go online. But I think there isn't really like a one formula to, go through that resistance.
I feel like you've just answered this question, so it may be a very short question. But are there any areas that are not suited for a virtual format in your experience?
Of the debriefing of a CVA small group assessment. At the moment, I have no idea. Can be virtual.
I think if it's a new client or a client that I'm not that familiar with, I would be more keen to do that face-to-face. I think if I didn't feel that we'd already got some sort of chemistry going, where we talked earlier about how we intuit the emotional state of people online and how we create empathy and create teamship in the call. And if I didn't feel we had the foundation stones for that, I might be inclined to be more keen to do it on a face-to-face basis. But I think it works in most scenarios, frankly.
You have actually said very much or talked very much about that. If you follow what are the basic human needs and make sure that that is being considered and taken care of in the virtual space, there will be even some benefits of working in the virtual space. But if you don't do that and then you don't have time for those things, then I would strongly say, no, we're not going to do it. It's not going to work. But I think you have answered that in a very beautiful way throughout this conversation.
Yeah, it's there's something about, for me, the key message is it's always in person. It's always human. Okay, so it's, someone was saying, seems that establishing the personal connection in the first place is necessary for virtual sessions to work. Yes, it's the basic. It's the personal connection, like the human connection, is everything. Even if you're like both together or even if you're virtually, yes, you have to generate that connection for it to work.
Mm. I'm looking at time. We have about 5 minutes left, and we have time for one more question, and then I think that we are going to have to wrap up because we are strict on the hour.
Yeah.
So
I have a statement. I have a statement from Mariana, which is not more of a question, but Mariana says, I have a huge presentation coming up and I'm a bit nervous. It's okay to be nervous.
It's okay.
We'll send you our best wishes.
Okay.
What would be your final advice, short advice to the audience before we close? If I start with Andrea.
I expected that.
Yeah, that's
my
good.
final advice, I would spend more time or most of the time in the preparation to be present if you are virtual.
Good one. And Malena, what would you say?
I would add on to that is super important, the empathy. Like stand in your client's shoes. How much do they know about the 7 levels? Do they need a little bit more explanation prior to the encounter, like the virtual session, to be able to connect? And so, yeah, empathy.
Perfect. David, what would you say?
Keep it simple. It's just facilitation. It's what we all do all the time. And it's not special or weird. It's just facilitation. Yes, we do need to focus on certain things because we don't get the physical signals. But as Malena has very eruditely said earlier, we can still get the emotional feel from the virtual space. So keep it simple. It's just facilitation.
Thank you. Such lots of wisdom coming my way or our way here. I'd like to say my deepest thank you to all of you panelists, Malena, Andrea, and David. Thank you very much for coming and preparing for this seminar. And then also, of course, I think that we are about 85 participants at the most who joined, but we had more than 200 who have signed up, so there are more people who want to listen to this. Thank you for taking your time and invest in your time to listen and learn from this wisdom. And thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Phil, for leading the Q&A session at the end. And